Welcome back. Debate continued on Tuesday in the Senate in Trinidad and Tobago on the very controversial topic of sexual offences legislation and whether the identities of people placed on a sex offenders registry should be made public. While some legislators called for full transparency, others cited constitutional rights and concern for the well-being of the perpetrators, while one independent senator even called for the death penalty. Meantime, government is advocating for one very common act to be listed as a sexual offense.
Legislators engaged in a tenuous balancing act as they endeavor to craft legislation to protect victims and the public at large from sexual offenders, while also observing the rights of the perpetrator.
On the one hand, we have people that want to see transparency to know who all offenders are at the moment on which an allegation of an offense comes about. And then on the other hand, we have people that say, no, let us seek to rehabilitate. Let us keep the names private.
Apart from the common grievous sexual offences, the Sexual Offences Amendment Bill 2021 will also introduce what some may term as very common offences as sex charges.
To treat with things like voyeurism, revenge porn, criminalizing the disclosure of intimate images and videos, etc., against the will of someone. That is not criminalized in our law.
Government seeks to create 2 sex offenders registers, one of which will be accessible to members of the public,
which is a website operated by the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. That public register is one where we are putting the flow to get there as follows. The court makes an order that you're a sex offender. You shall be put onto the register unless you say to the court that you don't want to be put on the register.
The Attorney General says such a situation may arise in a case where the person is appealing the judgment. But Opposition Senator Jayanti Lachmidial wants the power to rest with the court and not the perpetrator.
But what about the victim? The victim has no right here to say that, listen, if you publish, and the Attorney General used the exact example I wanted to use, a case of incest. If the victim feels that by publishing the information in relation to her attacker who committed incest, an act of incest against her, will expose her identity and it will forever be something that she has to carry the shame and so on of, the victim ought to have a voice.
She also suggests that excessive punitive measures will only result in increased rates of reoffending, adding that it's not just about punishment or protecting victims, but also about rehabilitation when the offender leaves prison. But independent senator and psychiatrist Dr. Varma Dayal Singh, who works closely with victims and perpetrators of sexual offences, supports the ultimate punishment, particularly for crimes against children.
So even if the Attorney General wants to bring the death penalty for certain heinous crimes of rape, I will support the death penalty in that area because I'm seeing persons are driven to suicide, persons' lives have been destroyed.
Renessa Cutting, TV6 News.
Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan faces criticism after blaming a rise in sexual violence in Pakistan on women wearing very few clothes. He said it is common sense that wearing very few clothes will have an impact on men. More from CNN.
So this idea of sexual violence happening because women are scantily dressed. I mean, aside from the fact that it's clearly not true, a lot of Pakistani women have come out and talked about the fact that they have been harassed even when they are fully covered. What has been the reaction, both internationally and domestically where you are in Pakistan, to Mr. Khan's comments?
Well, Zen, let's talk domestically. Let's talk about how this has touched a nerve amongst Pakistani women. It truly is something that triggers a lot of women here in this country, where it's almost a coming of right, like it's a rite of passage to be sexually assaulted or harassed as a woman in Pakistan. It is something that hundreds of women on social media have reacted to. There's a lot of outrage, there's a lot of upset, and basically women are tired of hearing these kind of comments from their leaders again and again within Pakistan. Of course, there's been universal condemnation on these comments. There's been, an international outcry. There've been various news organizations that have covered this, but this is something that truly has hit a nerve here in Pakistan. A lot of women have shared how they were just 5 years old, for example, wearing outfits that fully covered them, and yet they were still harassed by men. It's not just women who've spoken about this, other men have spoken about this as well. There have been recent reports of babies being sexually abused, and those have been mentioned on Twitter that, what do babies have to do with the clothes they wear? So the correlation between what women wear and sexual abuse is something that a lot of female activists here in Pakistan feel should be taken out of this conversation when it comes to sexual abuse. Let's have a listen. Let's listen into what Khan actually said when he was speaking to Jonathan Swan today.
If a woman is wearing very few clothes, it will have an impact on the men, unless they're robots. I mean, it's common sense.
Yes, but is it really going to provoke acts of sexual violence?
It depends which society you live in. If in a society people haven't seen that sort of thing, it will have an impact on them. If you grow up in a society like you, maybe it won't on you. This cultural imperialism, whatever is in our culture, must be acceptable to everyone else. It's not.
But forgive me, when you were a cricket star, you were seen as a playboy. There were photos of you with your shirts off in your bedroom. It's a bit rich for you to be criticizing this.
This is not about me.
Well, Zen, this is the thing. He's speaking about cultural imperialism, and it is a fact that Pakistan does have a conservative society, and that's not something that people are arguing against. What women here in Pakistan are saying is that let's not talk about what we're wearing and let's try to solve these issues. It's creating a cultural war here in Pakistan with a lot of conservative people agreeing with the Prime Minister, and there's been a backlash to what he has said, like I mentioned earlier with regards to people. And this isn't the first time that he said this. It comes 2 months after he made similar comments, and he had to backtrack and say that his words were taken out of context.
An investigation by the BBC has found more than 2,000 migrant children are being detained in disease-ridden and overcrowded conditions in the Texan desert. The camp at Fort Bliss in El Paso consists of at least 12 tents, some of which hold hundreds of teenagers. Staff working there say illnesses such as COVID-19, flu, strep throat, and lice have affected hundreds of children since it was set up in March. The Department of Health and Human Services, which employs private contractors to help run the camp, did not respond to specific allegations. It said it is providing required standards of care for children, such as clean and comfortable sleeping quarters, meals, toiletries, laundry, educational and recreational activities, and access to medical services. More from the BBC.
Children feel like they are in prison.
We heard one of the contractors raped a girl at night.
I've come across children who have been cutting themselves. There are very significant numbers of kids with COVID. I think the crowding is the #1 reason that illnesses have spread. Lice became a very big problem. At one point, when all the girls were consolidated into one tent, the lice were so widespread they actually had to put the tent into lockdown.
And how many girls were in that tent?
Hundreds and hundreds of girls.
I watched the days go by and I felt very low. I thought that I was not going to get out of there, that I was not going to see my family again. and sometimes at night we would cry. During the worst time, I was nearly at the point of committing suicide. It was difficult to see a doctor for medicine, and when we went to ask for medicine, they gave us dirty looks, and they always laughed among themselves. The food was not well cooked. Sometimes the chicken had blood on it, the meat was very red. We were so hungry we ate it, but we got sick from it.
The desert storms are crazy. The whole tent starts shaking. Some of the tents open up and sand rushes in. You literally have to shield your whole body from sand. By the end of the day, we are all just covered in dust from head to toe.
We have already caught staff with minors inappropriately. Is that okay with you guys? I hope
not. We heard one of the contractors raped a girl at night. DHS mentioned there was a rape and they are giving the girls pregnancy tests. I also heard they just announced the results in front of everyone here. And I heard the other night that another contractor was caught in a boy's tent, doing things with him.
We've been told by the trainers stories at this facility that staff have developed inappropriate relationships with children, men who've developed relationships with some of the girls, and even some of the women staff who've developed relationships with boys. After a child has been here for more than a few days, they're saying, you gotta get me out of here. I just can't stand it anymore.
The latest weather report is coming up after the break.